role. Reinforce its role in the Middle East. This is part of Vladimir Putin's wider project, recreating lost Russian influence that ebbed away after the Soviet Union fell after the Cold War. This is yet another example of Russia moving into a vacuum where the United States has decided it doesn't want to play a leadership role. This does get to a sort of underlying theme of American foreign policy and politics right now, and that is exactly what kind of role should the United States play. The Trump theory of America first is that the United States doesn't need to be involved in all of these areas around the world, and its strength is best preserved by not getting sucked into these areas. But let's look at this situation particularly. It's not as if there were 100,000 troops, US troops in Syria like there once were in Iraq and Afghanistan. This is a small detachment of special forces that was working successfully alongside the Kurds, not just to keep that region stable, but to keep ISIS from resurging. So, the president, to make a political point, has blown up that entire operation, which was a limited, successful operation. And for many people, it's a blueprint of exactly how the US should extend its influence in the years going forward, and in the aftermath of those big land wars that it fought disastrously over the last decade.
Yeah, and we are just looking at pictures here, which really tell the story. It's these pictures that Donald Trump, or what's going on in these images, that Donald Trump is saying is not our problem. There are people losing their lives on the Syrian side of that border. Ellie, Donald Trump's foreign policy, front and center, not just with regard to Turkey, but it's at the very heart of this impeachment inquiry over the Ukraine controversy. Republicans not backing down from their efforts to stonewall this inquiry. Have a look at the top names in the Trump administration who are refusing to comply with these subpoenas or requests. How long can they keep this up?
So the ball really is in Adam Schiff's court now. We are seeing a stonewall from the administration, and the question is, how is Adam Schiff going to respond? He really only has two viable options. One is to get into the courts, to challenge these, to seek court orders requiring these individuals to comply with the subpoenas. The good news is they'll probably win eventually if they go that route for House Democrats. The bad news for House Democrats, though, is it takes time, and probably time that they don't have given the political realities of an election being less than a year, or just over a year away. So the court route is really, that may be where the administration is hoping this goes if their strategy is to drag their feet and stonewall. The other option is to just work around the people who are not responding and say, okay, you're gonna clam up, you're gonna refuse to give us evidence. We'll build based off the evidence we do have. The call between Trump and Zelensky, the text between the State Department officials, the testimony that they are getting from the career diplomatic professionals, and we're seeing that testimony come in throughout this week, and I think it's really bolstering the case. So I would go with option number two. I would just make this case the best I could if I was in their position. And the people who are going to obstruct, they can obstruct. Maybe there will be an article of impeachment for obstruction on top of everything else.
He needs a rewind. I'm going to take a very short break, gentlemen. Thank you for the time being. Stick around. I'm going to pay for this. Won't be long. Folks, back after this.
This is Kate.
Hey.
She takes 2 prescriptions. Kate's son Jack takes 1 too.
Donald Trump has had some pretty stark words to say about Turkey's operation in Syria. Quote, "It is not our problem." That's 250,000 refugees, not our problem, he says. Hundreds of people dead, not our problem, he says. ISIS re-emerging, not our problem, he says. Annoying his allies, not a problem, he says. His own party going against him, not our problem, he says. All of that as US Vice President Mike Pence is set to board a plane later today, bound for Turkey, in a meeting with the President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Let's bring in CNN's Arwa Damon at the Turkish-Syrian border, and our Fred Pleitkin, who is in Moscow, Stephen Collinson and David Gergen also still with us. Not our problem, he says, about what is going on in Syria as a result of this Turkish operation, invasion, incursion, call it what you will. How's that going to go down on the ground, Awa?
Well, I mean, look, Becky, the issue, I think, is not with the U.S. necessarily just saying not our problem and what that means. It's that no one knows exactly how real that statement is because American foreign policy is so schizophrenic these days. If key players in the region actually knew that the U.S. was going to begin to pull back from its involvement, that it was going to begin to alter its foreign policy in the region, then they could make adjustments accordingly. Right now, all they're being told is, well, the president of the United States really isn't in the mood to deal with you right now. So right now you're not his problem. But at the same time, all these other moves are going to be undertaken by the United States. So no one knows how to react to this, aside from the fact that the notion that the war on ISIS is not America's problem, is not everyone's problem, is mind-boggling. It defies logic because ISIS is not an entity that stays neatly confined inside one specific area. It is a rabid ideology that has not been defeated. And we have to go back very briefly and remember how ISIS became ISIS. It's because at every step along the way, since 2004, and all of its previous incarnations, it was declared defeated when it wasn't. And its ideology was able to survive and thrive in chaos. That chaos is exactly what we have right now. And every single observer of the region, every single expert on the region will tell you, brace yourselves. ISIS is coming back.
Turkey at present, experts in this region says Fred is acting like an ally of the Russians. Let's get to Donald Trump, and we're just going to listen to what he says.
We'll be meeting also, who's here right now with us, and he's going to be joining the meeting. We have a lot of great people over there, we'll see. In the meantime, our soldiers are not in harm's way, as they shouldn't be, as two countries fight over land. That has nothing to do with us. And the Kurds are much safer right now, but the Kurds know how to fight. And as I said, they're not angels. They're not angels. If you take a look, you have to go back and take a look. But they fought with us. We paid a lot of money for them to fight with us, and that's okay. They did well when they fought with us. They didn't do so well when they didn't fight with us. When I refused to allow the Americans a year and a half ago to fight with the Kurds against Iraq, I said, wait a minute. This country stupidly just spent a fortune on fighting for, with, around Iraq. Nobody knows how they spent it, but they spent, actually, we're in the Middle East now for $8 trillion, if you can believe that stupidity. But in Iraq, we're in for probably $5.5 trillion. So they're telling me, wait a minute, we just spent $5.5 trillion fighting in Iraq and with Iraq, and now we're supposed to spend money to fight with the Kurds against Iraq. I said, no, thank you. So what happens is when I said we're not going to fight with the Kurds left. They didn't want to fight against Iraq, which right now isn't the greatest fighting force in the world. That happened twice. The Kurds actually are pulling back substantially from Turkey, and Syria is pulling in. Syria probably will have a partner of Russia, whoever they may have. I wish them all a lot of luck. You know, Russia was involved in Afghanistan. It used to be called the Soviet Union. Now it's called Russia for a reason, because they lost so much money in Afghanistan that they had to downsize, a very big downsizing. So if Russia wants to get involved with Syria, that's really up to them. They have a problem with Turkey. They have a problem at a border. It's not our border. We shouldn't be losing lives over it. But again, we only had 28 soldiers. It was 26, 28. I got all different numbers. It ends up being 28. Between the 26, 28, two people, and they're fully accounted for. So that's the story. It's very simple. And we're watching and we're negotiating and we're trying to get Turkey to do the right thing because we'd like to stop wars regardless, whether Americans are in or whether they're not in. We want to see wars stop. That's a very important thing. On a humanitarian basis, we want to see that happen. Steve?
How about the argument that Mike Pence will be able to arrange a ceasefire?
What did you go into?
Yes.
Yes,
The answer was
I'll
no,
give
not
it.
at all.
She's going to be interpreting a different language here, so I'm going to fast forward this because it's fairly lengthy. It ain't going to do us no good to be able to hear her interpretation transliterated into another language. We'll kick it back on as soon as the president speaks. I think we're getting towards the end, right about now.
On the Turkish border with Syria to be for the United States strategically brilliant. Our soldiers are out of there. Our soldiers are totally safe. They've got to work it out. Maybe they can do it without fighting. Syria's protecting the Kurds. That's good. We are, and by the way, every player hates ISIS. Everybody we're talking about. Syria more than us. Russia more than us. They've done a big number on Russia. And we're over there fighting ISIS, but they're over there fighting ISIS too. They can handle it, and they should handle it. We can fight our own battles on our own territories. But you have a lot of countries over there that hate ISIS as much as we do. In some cases, probably more. So they can take care of ISIS. We have them captured. The United States captured them. Some were released just for effect, to make us look a little bit like, oh, gee, we got to get right back in there. But you have a lot of countries over there that have power and that hate ISIS very much as we do.
I have to ask this question. It's a $64,000 question. For some reason, the American people have been pulled into this relentless situation over in the Middle East that, as the President of the United States just got through explaining, has cost trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. In addition to the eyes, the ears, the hands, the arms, the feet, the legs, and the human casualties that went along with it for the past 30 years. For the past 30 years. Let's go back 30 years. All right? Since we got involved with Desert Storm and Desert Shield. Can the American officials not understand two essential factors here? The first factor is we have been played for a bunch of fools over here in America towards dedicating this much time, energy, and effort and haven't gotten the bang for the buck. Sure, we can look at this and say that we have been played. We have been used. We have been manipulated. We have been taken advantage of. And the second thing that you have to ask the question of, pertaining to 9/11, September the 11th, 2001, that was a derivative from ISIS pertaining to the Sharia law, that these people have effectively affected our lifestyle over here in America to the degree that it is no longer us intervening in their lives, but rather their lives intervening in ours. And when the president makes a statement that it's not our problem, well, it must have been our problem for the past 30 years, because you just got to explaining that we've spent $8 trillion on this so-called it's not our problem. And the fact of the matter is you've got a boiling cesspool over there right now that has still to this day declared war on the United States, that wants to bring down not only Israel, but wants to destroy the American people's lives and the American way of our life. So whenever we have a president, President Trump, that speaks of it's not our problem, in which I may be taking things out of context here, because he was talking about this particular situation with the Turks and the Syrians, of it not being our problem. But looking at it from a bigger perspective, on a global scale, it is our problem. It has been our problem, and it's going to continue to be our problem until we abolish, until we stomp out the very axes of evil that created all this to begin with. And it's not ideology, it's ideology. We're dealing with idiots over there that thinks that the only way that they can conquer the American people and other countries is through aggression, war, power, bloodshed. And it's kind of like what the president of the NRA had to say in regards to this type of situation, that the only way to defeat a bad person with a gun is with a good person with a gun. Because if you think that these people are going to stop, if you think that these people are going to back up, if you think that these ethnic groups over there are going to retreat and all of a sudden become like we are towards turning thy cheek and offering thy other, you're only deceiving yourself, Mr. President. These people are out for blood. They are out to take the world over in their extreme ideology or ideology, whichever terminology that you want to use. I prefer to use the terminology of ideology because, as far as I'm concerned, they're all a bunch of idiots that thinks that they can overturn or actually conquer over the good civilian life here in America, pertaining to what that we have been taught for generations and generations and generations, going back centuries ago, towards our free, open, fair democracy. These people, they don't want to play by the rules. The only thing that they know is bloodshed, hardship, and I hate to be drug into the same type of aggression that they want us to drag us into, but the fact of the matter is, even God himself, in the book of Revelations, in the King James Version, in the first 4 chapters of Revelations, speaks about how that he hates Balak and Balaam and those who are lukewarm and those who profess to be Jews that are not. Even God himself hates these people, and hates these people's ways, and hates these people's ideology and their ideology. God himself, the very creator that created all the heavens and the earth, the moons and the stars, and created all the creation that we're familiar with, in addition to the stuff that we're not familiar with, God himself hates these people. The God of Jacob, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of the holy, righteous, living God hates these people and hates these people's ways. So to make an announcement to the world that it's not our problem, it's everybody's problem. Whenever you're talking about an evil empire that is striking at the very core of the children of God all over the world. And the fact of the matter is, they have never been put down properly. ISIS, there's going to be groups that's going to come out of their toxic environment that's going to be just as crazy in the way that they think and why they think the things that they think as the group before them and the group that's going to be after them. So the only way to rid the axis of evil is to cut the head off of the snake. You can take a snake and cut its tail off and it still lives. You can take a snake and cut it halfway in two and sometimes it still lives. You got to go after the head. The main stem of where this existed from to begin with, in which if you'll go back and read the Bible, it'll tell you where it all stems from, pertaining to Balaam and Balak, going back into the book of Daniel, when the hand wrote on the wall in regard to all of this. This has costed not just the American people, but what the president just got through explaining is that this has costed other nations and other countries oodles and gobs of pain and misery. This has been a burden that has been placed upon to the civilized society. A great burden. And what does God say about that burden? Over in Revelations, the first 4 chapters, he said that I will not put up unto thee none other burden. Hold fast till I come. When God comes, he will deliver his people out of these bondages that we have been put under. But until that time, until God actually comes back and gathers up the elect from the 4 corners of the earth, this is something relentlessly that we're going to all have to deal with, regardless whether it be the Americans or the Russians or the people in China or the people in India or the people in Africa. This has affected people's lives all over the world. So to make a statement, it's not our problem, I think you're going to have to walk that back, Mr. President, because in actuality, it has been our problem. It remains our problem. Now, getting back to not taking things out of context pertaining to the Turks and the Syrians, that particular event where they're fighting over land masses may not be our problem. Looking at it on a very, very narrow scale, that particular event may not be our problem. But looking at it from a global event, looking at it from a wide view lens, yes, sir, this is our problem. It was the American people's problem in New York City in 9/11 whenever 2 airplanes got turned into 2 missiles that killed over 3,000 people, that today we're still suffering the recourses of. It is our problem in that perspective.
So I think we're in a very strategically good position. I know the fake news doesn't make it look that way, but we've removed all of our, as we said, 50 soldiers, but much less than 50 soldiers. They're now in a very safe location, heading into an even safer location. And we will help negotiate. We have tremendously powerful sanctions. Our country has become economically much more powerful than, frankly, it ever was. We picked up trillions and trillions of dollars in worth. The market was up big yesterday. It's going to be up big today, it looks like. The trade deal with China, just having to do with what we've done with the financial services, with banks, with the farmers, has been incredible, far greater than anyone ever thought. I agree it hasn't been papered yet, but it's being papered. But in the meantime, as you know, and as we've said many times, China's already started buying. They want to buy. They want to make a deal. They really have to make a deal. Their economy's been hurt very badly by what we've done and by the tariffs that we've charged. We've taken in tremendous amounts of tariffs. A small portion of them we've given to the farmers, which is more than made up for what they've lost. Go ahead.
Sì, no, come dicevo prima, appunto, noi la situazione degli Stati Uniti dal punto di vista di posizione strategica nel confine Turchia-Siria è brillante. Noi abbiamo riceveranno una parte di questi benefici.
Newfound economic power of the United States because of the fact that we've made so many trillions, many trillions of dollars in worth of the United States. I call it the newfound economic power. If my opponent would have won, China would right now be the most powerful nation economically in the world, and right now they're not even close. And if we're smart, they never will get close. But it depends on who sits in this chair. But the United States has tremendous economic power, far more power than playing around with having a few soldiers shooting each other at the border. I mean, you have a few soldiers back and forth killing each other at the border. The power we have with sanctions and tariffs is far greater than what we're talking about. With that being said, our military has been completely rebuilt. Much of the equipment's already been delivered. We spent $2.5 trillion rebuilding it over the last 3 years. And our military power is at the highest level, and our economic power is at the highest level. But I'd always rather use economic power before I use military power, because people aren't getting killed with economic power. Okay?
Mr. President, you're going to see House Speaker Nancy Pelosi today. How do you expect that to
Prima che la vostra collega introducesse nuovamente l'argomento che il Presidente Trump ha trattato, il Presidente Trump ha parlato con molta cortesia della questione dei possibili dazi conseguenti alla vicenda dei finanziamenti europei all'Airbus. Io vorrei, è naturalmente un argomento di cui parleremo questa mattina con il Presidente, e io mi auguro che sia possibile, come ritengo, trovare un metodo di confronto collaborativo che eviti uno scambio di provvedimenti ritorsivi tra le due parti. A me sembra, e all'Italia sembra, che sia preferibile nello spirito transatlantico incontrarsi, confrontare le posizioni e cercare insieme una soluzione che tenga conto, in cui ciascuna delle due parti tenga conto delle esigenze e delle ragioni dell'altra parte. L'alternativa, quella di imporre dazi che probabilmente chiamerebbero delle reazioni, per poi ripetere questa vicenda tra qualche mese, quando la Commissione mondiale del commercio adotta provvedimenti riguardanti i finanziamenti per la Boeing, rischia di metterci su una strada che poi renderà comunque indispensabile un punto di incontro e un'intesa. Tanto vale cercarla subito e perseguirla subito.
And before the members of the press introduce topics that have already been discussed this morning, President Trump was talking about the possible implementation of tariffs on European products following the whole Airbus affair. Of course, that's a topic that we will certainly be discussing this morning, and I do hope that we can come up with a cooperative-based approach and a frank discussion so that we can avoid retaliation between the two parties. Italy and I myself personally have always felt that it's better to talk things through, to find a common solution, to find some sort of understanding for one another's stances. Because the alternative to that would be tariffs followed by retaliation, followed by further tariffs. And we also have to understand that we are waiting for a solution of the Boeing affair as well. So, of course, within the spirit of the Atlantic Alliance, within the spirit of the friendship we've always had, I do feel it would be best to discuss these things and understand one another.
Well, in theory, there can't be retaliation because this was an award that we got because of the fact that the European Union took advantage of past presidents, and this was an award that we got for the unfair treatment given to the United States by the European Union. So there should be no retaliation. This was getting us even because $7.5 billion worth of things happened, bad things happened, unfair things happened to the United States by the European Union. So this was just getting us back to even. And nobody else but me would have gotten that $7.5 billion back for the taxpayers of the United States.
Now that's true.
Beh, non credo che si possa parlare veramente di ritorsioni, perché l'aggiudicato dell'OMC nei confronti degli Stati Uniti è stato proprio a seguito di un fatto che l'Unione Europea.
Yeah.
I'm sure you saw reports that John Bolton said that Rudy Giuliani was like a hand grenade the way he was acting. And are you concerned that Bolton could be called to testify in your impeachment court?
No, look, John Bolton, I got along well with him. Some people didn't. Some people didn't like John Bolton. I actually got along with him pretty well. It just didn't work out. I don't know that he got along with Rudy Giuliani. Rudy Giuliani was seeking out corruption and what happens mostly in the 2016 election, because there was tremendous corruption in the 2016 election. I think even you would admit that. The election was, it was disgraceful what happened, and what happened to me and what happened to the Republicans. And that continues with Nancy Pelosi and with Schiff. Adam Schiff got caught making up statements that he said I said that I didn't say, which is fraud. I mean, it's purely fraudulent. So it continues. So Rudy was a great prosecutor. He was the best mayor in the history of the city of New York, as far as I can see. I think he's pretty much acknowledged what he did for crime and everything else. And when he saw what was going on with our election of 2016, the election I won, but the election that was absolutely corrupted by things that took place in government. Now, we'll see what happens. The IG report's going to come out soon, and we'll see what happens. I think I know nothing about it in terms of the report. I'm waiting for the report like everybody else, but I predict you will see things that you don't even believe, the level of corruption, whether it's Comey, whether it's Strzok and his lover Page, whether it's so many other people, McCabe, whether it's President Obama himself. Let's see whether or not it's President Obama. Let's see whether or not they put that in. Wait a minute. Let's see whether or not. So Rudy saw that, and I can tell you Rudy Giuliani, because he was very, very incensed at the horrible things that he saw, as are many people. Okay, and many Republicans, and the Republicans have been treated very unfairly by the Democrats. I'll say this. Paul Ryan would never issue a subpoena. I don't say right or wrong. He wouldn't do it. He had too much respect for our country. Nancy Pelosi hands him out like cookies. Everybody, I don't even know these people. For the most part, people like that at testify, I don't even know who they are. I never even heard of some of them, most of them. But I have all these people testifying, and then they leak out. They don't say the good parts. They only say the bad parts. We're not allowed to representation. We're not allowed to lawyers. We're not allowed to have anything. The Democrats are treating the Republicans very, very badly. Fortunately, we have a lot of good, strong, smart Republicans, but they never dealt, John, with the Democrats the way the Democrats deal. And the Republicans won't forget it, because what they're doing, what the Democrats are doing to this nation is a disgrace. What they have done, the disrespect that they've shown to the presidency, and it'll happen to them, because if the Republicans have the House, which I think they will, because of impeachment, I think because of this nonsense impeachment, it's based on a perfect phone conversation, an absolutely perfect phone conversation with the president of Ukraine. A friend of mine who's a top lawyer read it, said, this is perfect. You didn't say, did you know this was going to happen? Actually thought it was going to happen. There were many people listening to that conversation, because when I speak to a leader, like if I speak to the president of Italy, if I speak to anybody, I know that there are many intelligence people on the line. I know that. I mean, with my understanding and knowledge. I don't know exactly who, but I assume there are many people. Fortunately, they had transcribers, stenographers, people that do this for a living on the line, because we have an exact copy of the report, of the call. So the call was put out immediately when I started hearing about the whistleblower. Well, the whistleblower's report was totally wrong. The whistleblower didn't know what he was talking about, or was given false information, or was even worse than that. Now all of a sudden Schiff doesn't want to talk to the whistleblower. Now all of a sudden quid pro quo doesn't matter, because now they see in the call there was no quid pro quo. So with Rudy was seeking out corruption, and I think there's nothing wrong with seeking out corruption. Did you have Steve?
Rudy registers some foreign lobbyists.
I don't know what he did. I don't know. That's up to him. That you have to ask. Excuse me. No, you have to ask Rudy those questions. Don't ask me. But Rudy was one of many people that was incensed at the corruption that took place during that election. Pure corruption. For instance, I still ask the FBI, where is the server? How come the FBI never got the server from the DNC? Where is the server? I want to see the server. Let's see what's on the server. So the server, they say, is held by a company whose primary ownership individual is from Ukraine. I'd like to see the server. I think it's very important for this country to see the server. Nobody wants to see it. The media never wants to see it, but I'll tell you, Republicans want to see it. So Republicans aren't treated well. Here's the problem. I think we're going to take the House based on what's happening with the impeachment stuff. And the Republicans can do the same thing in reverse if they ever have it. I hope it's going to be a long time because nobody's done a better job with the economy, with our military, I've rebuilt the military. Our economy is the best it's ever been. We have numbers that just came out where, not including taxes, the median household income for the average American has increased $5,000 in a very short time since I've been president. Nobody's ever heard of numbers like that. So people want to find out, why was it so corrupt during that election? And I want to find out more than anybody else. Steve, go ahead.
One of the things that has been exposed by the Turkey situation is that as many as 50 nuclear weapons are at Incirlik Air Base in Turkey. How confident are you those weapons safe?
We're confident.
Did you hear what he just said? There is 50 nuclear weapons. Let's back it up.
And we have.
Let's back it up.
One of the things that has been exposed by the Turkey situation is that as many as 50 nuclear weapons are at Incirlik Air Base in Turkey. How confident are you those weapons safe?
We're confident, and we have a great air base there, very powerful air base. That air base alone can take any place. It's a large, powerful air base. And you know, Turkey, just so people remember, Turkey is a NATO member. We're supposed to get along with our NATO members. And Turkey is a NATO member. Do people want us to start shooting at a NATO member? That would be a first. And that's all involved having to do with NATO. Yeah.
Mr. President, you're going to be seeing House Speaker Nancy Pelosi today. How do you anticipate that?
Well, I'd say this. I think that she's done this country a tremendous disservice. She's created a phony witch hunt, another one. First one failed. They're all failing. This one is just absolutely crazy. All you have to do is read the transcript of the call. Read the transcript. This is a...
We have read it, President, and what it says is, but I have something that I need for you to do for me. We have read the transcript. We know what the transcript says. Please don't treat us like we're children. And we don't know what you said and what your intent was. Please quit trying to manipulate us.
Open and shut, simple case. They're desperate because they know they're going to lose the election. They're desperate to do something because they know they're going to lose the election.
That's your opinion.
This administration has created the strongest economy in the history of our country. We have the greatest stock market. We had over 100 times we broke the record for stock market. If you look at people's stocks, their 401ks, if you look at anything you want to look at, they're far better off now than they probably ever have been in this country. Record stock markets. And don't forget, stock market's not just rich people, it's all people. Because all people own in the stock markets. New York Stock Exchange, all of them. They're at record highs. Nobody's ever done what we've done. So they're playing games. They figure they can't win the election. So maybe we can find some ground. We'll get somebody that Trump never met, and maybe they'll say something bad about Trump. And if they do really bad, maybe it can stick a little bit. I don't think it's going to work. They've treated the Republican Party with great disrespect. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. My meeting with the family was really, it was beautiful in a certain way. They did not want to meet with the person in question, but we had a very good meeting. They're very nice people. And we met with a full group. It was 4 people, actually, as you know how it's all broken up. And the meeting took place right here at about 6 o'clock last night. And it was very sad, to be honest. She lost, and they lost their son. I believe it was going down the wrong way because that happens in Europe. You go to Europe and the roads are opposite. And it's very tough. If you're from the United States, you do make that decision to make a right turn where you're supposed to make a left turn. The roads are opposite. And she said that's what happened. That happens to a lot of people, by the way. But she said that's what happened. She was in the room right out there. We met right here in this area. And I offered to bring the person in question in, and they weren't ready for it. But I did offer. I spoke with Boris. He asked me if I'd do that, and I did it. Unfortunately, they wanted to meet with her, and unfortunately, when we had everybody together, they decided not to meet. Perhaps they had lawyers involved by that time. I don't know exactly. I know the people were lovely. They were very nice, and they were, desperately sad.
So did you suggest that the family had indicated at one point that they were interested in meeting with her?
I thought they were, based on what I saw. They wanted to meet, but now they say they only want to meet if they're in the UK. And that'll be up to them. But I did meet the family, and I expressed condolences on behalf of our country. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Wait, there's a great question I'm being asked. This is maybe the greatest question I've been asked in a long time. Please put those mics over here. Go ahead, say it again.
You're winning with the WTO because you're growing the biggest economy in the world. Are you willing to give Italy a break on tariffs?
We are looking at Italy very strongly, and as you know, the 7.5 is to be divided the way we say. We've divided it up. Italy has got a problem with the way we've divided it up because they said they had much less to do with it. And Germany had more to do with it, and France had more to do with it, as an example. So we are going to look at that very strongly. Ambassador Lighthizer is here. We're going to look at it very strongly. Okay? Thank you. Good question. I love that question. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Oh, that is Donald Trump in a wide-ranging, almost half-hour question and answer session with the US president there, touching on trade, a US diplomat killing a British teenager, impeachment, but saving his harshest words for Syria. It's not our problem, the words of the US president on what is going on in Syria, adding that the Kurds are not angels, but somewhat oddly, he said they are much safer now. The US president also said US soldiers are out of there. They're safe. They, those on the ground, can work it out on their own. Maybe Syrians protecting Kurds. That's good, he said. And he went on to say, we are in a strategically good position, even if it doesn't look that way. Well, this all ahead of his vice president's trip to Turkey to see the president there in an effort to reset, one assumes. Good luck with that after this. Well, you couldn't be better served than by the panel I have standing by for you. Sam Kiley is with me here in Abu Dhabi. My colleague Stephen Collinson is in Washington. And Ed Luce is US National Editor of the Financial Times, and he is with us with his insight and analysis. I'm going to get back to all of you in a moment. Got to take a quick break. Back after this. In the Oval Office, Mr. Trump said that the Kurds are much safer now and says what's going on in Syria is not our problem. Well, that is despite the recent decision to pull US forces out of northern Syria, giving Turkey the green light to move on those Kurdish forces that helped American troops defeat ISIS. I've got a panel for you here. Sam Kiley with me, CNN's Arwa Damon, I believe, is on the Turkish-Syrian border. Stephen Collinson is in Washington, and Ed Luce, US National Editor for the Financial Times. I'll start with you, Ara, because you are there on the ground. You've been listening to what the US president said. Your thoughts, if you will.
It's shocking, Becky. I mean, the notion, first of all, that the Kurds are safer now, compared to what? Right now, the Kurds have had to bend the knee back to Damascus to be able to stop what they thought, from their perspective, was going to be a massive Turkish onslaught. They've had to bend the knee to a regime that they have tried to distance themselves from, although they did maintain something of a relationship with it. And President Trump also went on to say, the Kurds know how to fight, and as I said, they're not angels. I mean, the level of hypocrisy here is quite spectacular, because if the U.S. is gonna start deciding not to ally itself or just to turn away from anyone who's not an angel, there are plenty of other countries that America is in bed with that it should also be taking under consideration. But I think at the core of all of this, Becky, it's actually very heartbreaking to hear these kinds of words coming out from the White House and all that it is in theory meant to be standing for. And I think it sends a very dangerous message on multiple fronts. One, that allegiances with America don't mean much. Secondly, that the U.S. does not necessarily stand for all of the principles that it used to stand for. It will cherry pick when it wants to, when it chooses to, and that the world's leader, in theory, can be completely and totally sidelined by one individual. It sends a frightening message.
Ed, your thoughts?
I'd agree with that. It is heartbreaking, and it must be particularly heartbreaking if you're there on the ground seeing what's happening to the Kurds, to hear such words from the American president. I mean, it's an extraordinary refutation of his own policy too, which is to send the vice president, Mike Pence, and the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, the second and third most senior people in his administration, to Turkey, ostensibly to persuade President Erdogan to have a ceasefire or a pause. He just undercut them. He just sabotaged their flight before it took off. By saying it's not our problem, you know, the Kurds are no angels, these people have been fighting forever anyway, we've wasted enough money, they're safer now. It's the most extraordinary. We've seen this before from Trump, that he pretends to do one thing, in this case to be in favor of a humanitarian pause by the Turkish military, and does another. But this is a really egregious example, and I agree that what does America's word mean? Does it have any loyalty to anybody?
Sam, you're on the ground with me here in Abu Dhabi. You spent weeks, months in Syria, in and out of Turkey as well. When the US president, when you hear these words from the US president, who actually went on to say, we are in a strategically good position, even if it doesn't look that way, what's your response?
Well, I think there are two things going on here. And I think that Donald Trump, what certainly other leaders around the world need to learn to do, is to filter out the gobbledygook and look for the nuggets of what he's really talking about. He's been signalling since the end of last year that he wants out of northern Syria. It would therefore have been incumbent on those nations like the Europeans, who had a lot more flesh in the game, quite literally in the form of jihadis, to get more involved, because at any stage, as one general put it, they were one tweet away from strategic failure. So there is an effort here that has not been put in by other world leaders to deal with what has become the strategic problem with America, which is that they are evolving, or they have become, unreliable allies. So strategically, this is a disaster for the United States, and of course a catastrophe for the Kurds, but it's one that could have been mitigated by some smart thinking in other capitals around the world. A lot of other capitals just left it to Donald Trump.
Including in European capitals, of course.
Absolutely. European capitals are in extreme danger from another influx threatened of refugees, 3.6 million refugees in Turkey being threatened to be dumped on the Europeans. That is something that's not a new threat. They could have been more greatly involved, more directly involved.
What is also not new, Stephen, is the increasing strategic influence and importance of Russia in this Middle East region. I was interested to hear what the President, Stephen, said of Russia. He said it's not called the Soviet Union anymore for a reason, because they lost so much money in Afghanistan. They had so many issues.
Well, Becky, you know, when you watch one of those Oval Office news conferences with the president, you go into this kind of alternative reality bubble where bad fact is piled upon illogical fact, misrepresentations, misreadings of history. And basically, as Sam said, a lot of it is gobbledygook. But I think what people should think about this around the world is when they talk about what is the US going to do, what is the White House policy, what you saw there is exactly what is driving US foreign policy. It is whatever the president, who has a very rudimentary knowledge of strategy, of history, of frankly what's going on right now on the ground in northeast Syria. It's what he says it is when he says it. And that's why you have Mike Pence and Mike Pompeo flying across to Turkey to try and fix this retrospectively, and they're completely undercut, as Ed said, before they go. This is, you know, a completely non-strategic, in many ways, I think you have to say, an ignorant approach to the world, but the US president has a great deal of power. What you saw there was probably what was going on in the call with Erdogan, and projecting it forward in the next year before Trump faces re-election. You have to think what other massive strategic blunders he could walk the United States into.
But you also have to think about how that the United States has been duped in trying to handle something all by itself, to the point that the burden fell upon not just our military, not just our government, but the tax-paying people that are now suffering because of it, of, just like Donald Trump just got through saying, of costing almost $8 trillion in monetary funds and did not get the bang for the buck. You got to look at both sides of it. If you're going to look at this thing, you got to look at it through a wide, broad lens of understanding how come he's doing what he's doing. Do I agree with what he's doing? I don't know. That's beyond my pay grade. I'm not the president of the United States. I'm not a politician. I know this, that the past 3 or 4 administrations that has been involved in all this, beginning with the Bushes, as well as the Clintons, as well as the Obamas, has gotten us in a pickle. And this pickle has been brought, this burden has been brought upon to us because we have tried to do a good thing for a good cause that is now wound up backfiring on us economically. Economically, not counting all the lives, not counting all the hands, the arms, the ears, the legs that's been sacrificed on account of this. It is time to look at this from a wider view. And there's no doubt there's going to be suffering. There's going to be sacrifices that's going to have to be made on account of these abrupt changes. There's no doubt. And rather not it be for the good or for the bad, we as a nation here in America cannot continue to go down a path of insanity that has costed us so dearly in monetary as well as physical form, if we're not getting the bang for the buck. The rest of the nations should have merged in with our movement, going back to Desert Storm and Desert Shield, rather than sitting back and allowing us to spend so much effort and so much time and so much money on a lost cause. And that's exactly what it's turned into towards trying to bring peace to the Middle East. It has turned into a lost cause, looking at it from an economical standpoint. from our view here in America, it has turned into a lost cause. It's like trying to beat a dead horse. Why are you going to continue to keep beating a dead horse if you know that the horse is dead? You know he's not going to rise. How come you're still beating the dead horse? So it's time to back up, revent, and rethink this through involving all of this. Now, pertaining to the impeachment, pertaining to the gentleman and the family with their son that got killed, these are all different issues. Just like the president saying it's not our problem in regard to the Turks and the Syrians pertaining to their land dispute problems over there. And in actuality, it's really not. It's really not our problem. It's their problem over there. They need to learn to stand up for themselves. If there's a dispute, if you can't handle it in regard to talk and legal counsel pertaining to trying to work things out in a civilized way, well, maybe this is the only way for those people to settle their issues, is through hardship. These are the people that has deliberately wanted not to get on board with the rest of the world pertaining to modern day occurrences. We got people over there that are still riding around on camels. We got people over there that are still living in huts. We got people over there that are still living like they was living 4 centuries ago. That wasn't our choice. That wasn't the American people's choice for those people to do that. They done that. They chose that lifestyle over there. Just like you got people over in Honduras and down in South America and in Mexico that are living in primitive, uncivilized, toxic environments that if the people would stand up against such atrocities, they would change their environment. They would change the things that are going on around them. Now, is this going to require for us to sit down and talk about these things? Or let's just back up. Is this going to require for those people that are living in those type of conditions to sit down and talk about these things? That's the beginning phases. That's always the beginning phases in trying to work things out in a diplomatic, civilized way. And of course, if things don't get achieved towards working them out in a civilized way, then sometimes the final results are to work things out in an uncivilized way. And I'm pretty sure, talking about the people over there in the Middle East, where you basically got about 67 to 70 different ethnic groups that all of them hate each other, I'm pretty sure that after they get through whipping each other's ass for a long enough period of time pertaining to all this bloodshed and seeing their children be desecrated and mutilated, after they get through watching this unfold up onto themselves long enough, there'll be a certain group of people that will rise out of the ashes and say, wait a minute, is this really worth all of this to us? Can't we do this in a different way? Well, that's what the American people tried to do, going all the way back 30 years ago. But it wound up biting us in the rear end. And now we're paying the ultimate cost for somebody else's problems. Was we meddling? No. We was trying to help those people. We was trying to give those people a new understanding about life, that there is such thing as electricity, there is such thing as running water, there is such thing as working things out in a civilized, diplomatic way. But they have chose not to do that, for whatever reason. We don't know if they're brainwashed, or they just have made a conscious choice that they want to live 4 centuries ago and still ride camels and live under huts. We don't know. But the fact of the matter is, it has become such of an astronomical burden to the American people. Now we are forced to have to do something on a big, broad view scale. And I'm pretty sure that the majority of the American people would agree with me on this. Now, what is going to escalate out of this? Once more, I hope to God that if the battle's going to be fought, that first of all, it's not fought over here in the United States. And I hope to God that they never bring out the nukes in thinking that that's the way to solve or to end, to settle the score. Because if that ever occurs, then we'll be looking at self-mutilation, not just pertaining to the people over in the Middle East, but it will be self-mutilation towards the whole population of the planet. If it ever works its way into that type of setting, which hopefully it will not ever, ever, ever get to that extent. But we don't know. We don't know what tomorrow holds. We know who holds tomorrow, but we don't know what tomorrow holds. None of us knows from day to day what we're going to have to face, what we're going to have to live through, regardless whether it be a sick loved one, regardless whether it be a disease that's fallen upon to our own personal lives, regardless whether it be an accident, a heart attack, some sort of other dilemma that occurs in our lives. None of us know from day to day of what we're going to have to face and how we're going to react and respond to it until it's upon us. Hopefully, this will be worked out. Hopefully, we will see the manifestation of the Bible fulfill itself towards a great revival, and there be peace and utopia upon to the world, not just upon certain parts of the world, but the world. Hopefully we will see the healings of the nations as the Bible talks about it occurring. But right now, we're in troubled waters. We are in the eye of the storm. Not just for the Americans that have spent $8 trillion, and God only knows how many lives on that lost cause over there, but it's troubling waters for all the nations right now that are looking at this and scratching their heads and raising eyebrows and wondering, what the heck is going on?
Ed, I want to give the last word to you. Where does this all go? We've got 90 seconds.
I think it continues to go in a very bad direction on the ground in northeast Syria. In terms of the politics here, I mean, clearly that mission by Pompeo and Pence, a sort of Operation Save Face mission, has been sabotaged. It was directed at the hawkish Republicans, which is most of the Republicans who, unlike on Ukraine and other issues, have rebelled over this. Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell, etc. And he shot that down. So I think the degree to which Trump is provoking a backlash here from the national security establishment, including within his own party, should not be underestimated. This is a very, very dangerous strategy for Trump, if you can call it a strategy, for Trump to be pursuing.
I'm going to have to leave it there. We are out of time. To all of you, thank you so much for joining us. It's not our problem. Words from Donald Trump. You wonder if possibly they'll come back to haunt him. We are just moments away from hearing from the American president. Again, he will be speaking alongside the Italian president in a formal news conference this time. You see the press gathering there.
Sad. We're in sad times. Just like the Bible talks about, we're in perilous times. We're in uncertain times.
In the White House who have studied this, who have looked at this over many years. There is just about unanimity amongst foreign policy experts that the administration's actions have created the potential calamity and catastrophe, and yet they seem to be blinkered themselves away from that.
Yes, that's true. And again, even in the lead up to the president's decision and his conversation with Erdogan a couple weeks ago, U.S. officials were working very hard to try and forestall some kind of a Turkish invasion, to work on this security mechanism between the Turks and the Kurds, convincing the Kurds to actually pull back their defenses in that region, which has since allowed Turkey to move forward much more quickly into Syria. So again, there is an understanding from U.S. officials that this was not the strategic move that they were working towards. But again, we see the president now trying to defend this. And it is clear, despite the president saying, you know, it's good that Syria is now protecting the Kurds, Russia is now there. The president created the vacuum for Syria, for Russia, and for their allies, Iran, to really come in there and have more power.
Jeremy, finally, it's no laughing matter, but people, you know, there's a lot of talk on Twitter and Facebook. I mean, the poor Italian translator who sat behind the president, who looked absolutely bewildered as what to translate and what to not. And I mean, this was a long, rambling diatribe. I mean, you know, disgrace, where's the DNC server? Big numbers, corrupt Debs, bad parts, perfect conversation. I don't know what people, but many people, stocks. I mean, what was going on in there?
Well, I'm not sure how you say conspiracy theory in Italian, but that might have been the best way for that translator to kind of sum it up, because we did hear the president once again raise a whole slew of conspiracy theories as it relates to the 2016 election, questioning whether it was Russia, in fact, who had hacked the DNC server and instead somehow perplexingly pointing the finger at Ukraine. And again, these are the matters that are at the heart of this kind of shadow foreign policy that we saw and that we are learning more about, that involved Rudy Giuliani on one side with his associates who have since been arrested for campaign finance violations as they were pushing this kind of alternate foreign policy in Ukraine that sometimes used American diplomats to their ends, but also raised a lot of concerns from American diplomats and U.S. officials working on national security matters pertaining to Ukraine.
Jeremy, thank you. Jeremy Diamond is at the White House. And
what did that guy just say? Did he just say Rudy Giuliani got arrested?
Which has since allowed Turkey to move forward much more quickly into Syria. So again, there is an understanding from U.S. officials that this was not the strategic move that they were working towards. But again, we see the president now trying to defend this. And it is clear, despite the president saying, you know, it's good that Syria is now protecting the Kurds, Russia is now there. The president created the vacuum for Syria, for Russia, and for their allies, Iran, to really come in there and have more power.
Jeremy, finally, it's no laughing matter, but people, you know, there's a lot of talk on Twitter and Facebook. I mean, the poor Italian translator who sat behind the president, who looked absolutely bewildered as what to translate and what to not. And I mean, this was a long, rambling diatribe. I mean, you know, disgrace, where's the DNC server? Big numbers, corrupt Debs, bad parts, perfect conversation. I don't know what people, but many people, stocks. I mean, what was going on in there?
Well, I'm not sure how you say conspiracy theory in Italian, but that might have been the best way for that translator to kind of sum it up, because we did hear the president once again raise a whole slew of conspiracy theories as it relates to the 2016 election, questioning whether it was Russia, in fact, who had hacked the DNC server and instead somehow perplexingly pointing the finger at Ukraine. And again, these are the matters that are at the heart of this kind of shadow foreign policy that we saw and that we are learning more about, that involved Rudy Giuliani on one side with his associates who have since been arrested for campaign finance violations as they were pushing this kind of alternate foreign policy in Ukraine. That
his associates got arrested. He didn't say that Rudy Giuliani got arrested. His associates got arrested.
That sometimes used American diplomats to their ends, but also raised a lot of concerns from American diplomats and U.S. officials working on national security matters pertaining to Ukraine.
Jeremy, thank you. Jeremy Diamond is at the White House. And before we leave your stories, let me just tell you that we are waiting for a press conference between President Trump and the Italian president. Some are already in the room, so we're just waiting for the officials and the two leaders.
Let's go forward. All this Strange and different.
To the United States. While we don't know specifics of what was agreed upon, we know that the union would not have felt encouraged to handshake on a deal had they not had that. Richard, in terms of next steps, we know that the top union officials from around the country have flown out here to Detroit and will be voting on this proposed tentative agreement tomorrow. If that passes, they'll then take it across the country.
All right, it looks like that's a good thing, or could be a good thing. Let's see what else is going on here. Go through a commercial. Still waiting on the White House. Some more breaking news. Another commercial.
One of our teams, just the approach began with the consumer, or the athlete, or the astronaut in this case, and then we backed up with what's the problems that we're solving for, and it began with everything from variability back and forth from temperature, what that might mean, into just comfort. So we were able to take about 8 inline technologies and actually utilize them to build the dozens of components that went into building this actual suit. So.
Kevin, do you think having something like this distinguishes Under Armour from your competitors, who often are very sport?
That's pertaining to people's clothing. Let's go forward a little more. Weather, news, White House, Democrats. Wow.
America, the sort of people who were there last night at the CNN debate in Ohio, how much will they actually approve of the fact that, yes, the president...
Change channels.
Elections, you're starting to say, if I win this nomination, and I think I could, I don't want to...
Fox.
5 painless screenings that go beyond.
Go to Fox News.
Billions of mouths, billions of problems. Dry mouth, parched mouth, cotton mouth, there's a TheraBreath for you.
All right.
TheraBreath, oral rinse and lozenges, help relieve dry mouth.
We're going to
using
end
natural
right there.
enzymes to soothe and moisturize, so you can breathe easy.
We're going to end right there because it looks like it's going to take entirely too long. I'm sure the president, all he's going to do is reiterate on what he's already said in that conference meeting with the Italian president. Rather than that it's formal, informal, whatever, I'm pretty sure he's just going to be a retake on all of that. So, to my viewers, good luck to all of us. That we can't emphasize on enough here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. And once more, shalom.